Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back into the SFS channel. My name is Gavin, and today we're going to be diving into a tiers list here, breaking down my top 24 wide receivers for redraft at this current point in time. It's late May right now. We're going to have to update this list quite a few times throughout this offseason, but I wanted to get this out there and obviously put together a video full of my thoughts and current evaluations of the wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 positions here. And again, kind of group these players together and break down how I see fit for these players, again, for the upcoming 2022 season. So today we're going to go right by the book. We've got our 6 tiers up on the screen. I'm going to start from the top and make our way to the bottom. There's a potential that I might forget about somebody and have to put them in their place as we make our way through the rest of the video. However, we're going to try and put this in order as much as possible for today's episode. So, that being said, if you're new around here, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure to drop down, leave today's episode with a like, and click that subscribe button to join the community. Turn the bell on so you're never late for an episode and get a notification whenever we come out with new content here. We're posting videos 5 days a week right now since we are entering into the summer of 2022 here. So, just for that, leave a like. We're getting some summer vacation here and obviously having some better weather outside. So our 6 tiers today, we've got the elite tier. These are going to be the guys that I think have the best shot at finishing as the wide receiver 1 overall. We'll have 3 players in that tier today. The 1A tier is going to be some of those players in that roughly 3 to 6 range where I think these guys still have an outside shot to finish as the top wide receiver in the 2022 season. However, I don't think they have quite as good of a situation outlined for themselves as some of the other names in today's video. The 1B tier is going to be those guys kind of in the middle where I think that they're a solidified wide receiver 1, but I don't really see a situation where they find themselves in that number 1 wide receiver role. There's a reason they're not being drafted as high as the other players at this spot on the list, and you'll see that reflected in these guys' ADP as well as we break them down in today's video. The wide receiver 1 bubble is what I like to call kind of the 10 through 17 range as I currently have it assessed right now. So clearly a handful of these players, more than half of them, will finish not as a wide receiver 1 this season. These are guys that you're going to see trickle into the wide receiver 3 category, potentially if there's an injury or some reason for a lack of success this year. They could finish as a wide receiver 3 rather than a wide receiver 2. But these are guys I think have a shot to be top 12 finishers. It's not a guarantee, though. There's flaws in the situation. It's not perfect. All that stuff. Strong wide receiver 2s are going to be guys that, again, probably have an outside shot to finish as a wide receiver 1 if they are able to fully maximize out that upside. But we're looking at them more between the 12 to 16, 12 to 18 range. Not quite on the fringe of the wide receiver 2 position. These are guys that are, you know, as we break them down and as we kind of look at what they bring to the table here, are definitely wide receiver 2s, and you prefer to have them as such on your fantasy rosters. And then the bubble wide receiver 2s, these are guys that you could see either finish in that top 24 group, more likely towards the bottom of that category, or could easily slip into the wide receiver 3 role. And obviously you'll have some outside names that aren't even on the list today that are going to find themselves moving up the pecking order in situations, getting more targets than expected, all that great stuff. So without further ado, we're going to dive into our first name here. Of course, the Triple Crown winner from last season, Cooper Kupp. His ADP places him as the first wide receiver off the board this season. He's going in that elite category, obviously has a very strong chance to repeat as the wide receiver 1 for this season. However, I do think we have to chart in or project some statistical regression because last season was an outlier year. It was the best of the best circumstance for Cooper Kupp. Nearly a record-breaking season, almost surpassed Calvin Johnson in terms of yardage put up in a given season. It was a phenomenal year, Super Bowl MVP season for Cooper Kupp, Offensive Player of the Year as well. Again, nearly 2K receiving yards, 16 receiving touchdowns, led the National Football League in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. So a heck of a year for Cooper Kupp. Again, though, I mean, as crazy as this sounds to say, a 1,500-yard season is realistic for Cooper Kupp when you assess the fact that he's probably not going to go for 1,800 or 1,900. I would totally have my jaw drop to the floor if he improved from last year's metrics and put himself into the 2,000-yard category. But I think it would be realistic of us to expect some sort of a drop-off, 400 to 500 yards in the receiving category. In terms of receiving touchdowns, it's probably more realistic. You talk about the receiving TDs leader in 2020. Davante Adams had 19 in the 2020 season. He drops down to 11 in 2021. So even if Cooper Kupp drops into the 8, 9, 10 category as opposed to the 16 he had last season, he's definitely not going to be under-respected by defensive units this year. They will approach him as the top weapon on the field. So moderate statistical regression for Cooper Kupp, still has a shot. He's definitely, if he plays, the majority of the games, a top 3 receiver this year. And again, has a shot to be the wide receiver 1. My favorite right now, I think the guy who I would project to be the wide receiver 1 if I had to pick a specific name today, now this could change going back and forth between the top 3 names on this list, obviously, is Justin Jefferson. Now, Jefferson was phenomenal as a rookie. Looked like a 4 to 5 year seasoned vet, a guy who had a complete tool set, a guy who can run nearly every route in the route tree. Well, he pretty much can run every single route in the route tree at a very high level. This is a player who really his only flaw in his game right now is the fact that Kirk Cousins is his quarterback, and that's not even necessarily a flaw because Justin Jefferson had nearly a 30% target share last season and was number 1 in air yards in the National Football League. So Kirk Cousins is not afraid to launch the football downfield. Now, the reason I say it was a flaw to have Kirk Cousins is because with Cooper Kupp here, you're going to see Matthew Stafford as his quarterback. With Ja'Marr Chase, the other guy who goes in the category, we'll talk about him in just a second, but since I'm bringing this up, he's got Joe Burrow. So Kirk Cousins is clearly the lowest tier quarterback of those 3. It's probably a video idea for another time as our quarterback tiers here. But in terms of the top 3 wideouts on the board, Justin Jefferson definitely has the worst quarterback play of the 3. Now, again, Kirk Cousins is not an elite passer, but that does not mean he's a bad quarterback to set up fantasy success here. Again, number 1 in air targets, a 29.9% target share for Justin Jefferson this season. Hopefully, I'm able to edit in some stats here so you guys can see just exactly some of the specifics I'm talking about here today. But 167 looks came Jefferson's way, and Kirk Cousins is certainly competent enough to get the job done. And if you're number 1 in air yards in any given season, no matter who your quarterback is, especially Kirk Cousins, a guy who can throw an accurate football, you're going to get some quality looks to put up points. So that brings us to Ja'Marr Chase here, number 3. Now, his target share was the most underwhelming of the 3 players at the top of the list here. Just 23.7% target share in the 2021 season, albeit his rookie year. However, we did see Justin Jefferson take that jump, surpass Adam Thielen without a question of a doubt in the 2021 year. I think Chase has the chance to do similar things here this season. And one of the players we'll talk about later on in today's episode, T. Higgins, actually had, by the slimmest of margins, a higher target share than Ja'Marr Chase. So it shows some area for improvement, but also you've got some significant competition for those targets. So it might not be so realistic to see a Ja'Marr Chase get to that 30% target share marker that we've seen, a Cooper Kupp, a Justin Jefferson, a Davante Adams, who we'll see here in just a second, get to in today's video. Now, the one thing I do want to mention, or the couple things I want to mention here with Ja'Marr Chase, is the fact that last season he was 3rd in deep targets. Now, this is significant because you're seeing him rack up efficient big plays here, which are giving you those quick points of production. But with that 3rd in deep targets comes the fact that he only had 12 red zone targets, which ranked 35th in the National Football League. So that's my concern, or my handful of concerns for Ja'Marr Chase in terms of being the number 1 wide receiver this season. You've got competition for targets, so how high is the target share ceiling? You've got the fact that you're not getting a significant amount of red zone targets. I would argue that T. Higgins, with his larger frame, larger wingspan, he might be a better look down in the red zone as opposed to Ja'Marr Chase. And then you've also got the fact that the majority of Chase's touchdowns are coming off the long ball. He's getting catches down the sideline. He's making huge plays after the catch. Whatever it might be, there's an argument to be made he might not be one of these elite red zone producers, one of these guys that has that ridiculously high touchdown count annually because of the fact of how he came, it's been one season, so we can't necessarily pigeonhole him into being a player that can't produce at an elite level in the red zone. However, that's just not how he got the job done in 2021, so just something to be mindful of there. The next player we're going to put up on the board here is going to be Tyreek Hill, if I can find him. Don't have a headshot from the Dolphins just yet. He's going in the 1A category. He's also going to be joined by another player or two here in today's video. But with Tyreek Hill, my one concern is how much of Tyreek Hill from the Kansas City Chiefs are we going to be able to see here with the Miami Dolphins. There's a real shot, and this is just being realistic and objective here, that Tyreek Hill finishes lower than this 1A category. There's a shot that he doesn't finish as a top 5 or 6 wide receiver this season. I would say there is significant risk with both Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill because of the quarterback situation in Miami. Now, that's not to say that these aren't great players, super athletic players that can get the ball out in space, have a lot of volume come their way. But when I looked at Jalen Waddle's efficiency, a player who I think is very similar to Tyreek Hill, we saw a lot of pre-draft comps between the two when Jalen Waddle came out this season or this past season as the, was he like the 6th overall pick to the Dolphins or something like that? Very high draft selection nonetheless. Jalen Waddle was not efficient last year because he had a lot of volume underneath and was asked to do a lot after the catch. Tua is not a quarterback that will set players up for the deep ball downfield. Now, he started to try and do that a little bit, and we saw him kind of, push the ball downfield in spurts, but that's not his number one skill set. Tua is a meticulous passer who's going to use the football IQ that he has to scan the defense, find the player in the best read. He's almost trying to be the left-handed Drew Brees as quarterback. He's not mobile and athletic to an elite extent where he's going to be able to play make and improvise like a Patrick Mahomes was able to do for Tyreek Hill for his career up until this point. You're going to see limitations that Tyreek didn't have in his situation before this point in time. So we'll talk a little bit about about Jalen Waddle a little bit more when he comes up, but he only had 9.8 yards per reception, which was 89th in the league last year. So for a big play receiver, or at least that's what I expected when I projected him in his rookie season, the quarterback play was always a bit of an issue. I think Tyreek is probably going to see some regression in that yards per reception category and see his efficiency dump a lot here with the Dolphins this season. Now, Davante Adams, we talked about him, or at least mentioned him before. Same situation, changed teams here this offseason. He's now a Las Vegas Raider, so he bumps down a notch for me this season as well, although I do think he might be the second best receiver in this league for fantasy football purposes. I'm going to put him in, again, that top 3 to 6 category here. Changing QBs. He does have chemistry pre-existing with Derek Carr from their time together at Fresno State. However, I think that the chemistry he built with Aaron Rodgers, the ridiculous target share he had with the Packers at 35% this past season, and the fact that he's had 29 touchdowns in his last 2 seasons, almost 15 per year, is completely insane to me. 14 and a half if we want to be exact. He's been a red zone monster, the most reception touchdowns since the year 2016 of anyone in the league. He's going to provide a lot in that area of the field. That's kind of my knock on Ja'Marr Chase, or at least my question mark that I have for him, because I am, again, very, very confident in Chase for this season and would not be surprised to see him finish number 1 overall. But these are boxes that Davante checks. Just the one question I have is, A, he'll get dinged up on occasion here. He's getting older. He's going to turn 30 years old this fall. And you've got, again, that situational change, and I would argue far more significant competition for targets. So you talked about that I talked about the ridiculous target share he had in Green Bay this past season. He will not get that with the Raiders. You've got Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow and a quality run game. Now, Green Bay had a quality run game as well, but he is not getting the same target share he saw with Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. It just will not remain that similar of a situation. The quarterback play is there. The chemistry is there. The ability to make big plays and have wildly productive weeks is still there. But the raw number of passes that will head his direction, or at least the piece of the pie of the offense that Davante Adams will be getting in that passing game, will be a lower count than it was as a Green Bay Packer. Now, the final member of this 1A tier for me is going to be Deebo Samuel. And All three of these players have their risk. You've got Tua as the big red flag here with Tyreek Hill, the drop-off in target share with Devontae Adams as a member of the Raiders. Deebo, he might just not want to play football. You never know. And it's not, okay, that's a poor way to phrase it. It's not that he doesn't want to play football. It's that he might not want to play football for the San Francisco 49ers, who still own the rights to his NFL contract. He's still on his rookie deal. He obviously wants a massive extension because last season was super, super impressive. Now he still has 1 year here to go on that rookie 2019 contract. He will be a free agent or is set to become a free agent this coming season. Obviously, a player of his physicality playing in an offense that plays the physicality the 49ers do, he doesn't want anything to do with the franchise tag either. So a holdout is definitely in play here. We could see that occur. The one thing that makes me think that Deebo could get screwed here and not see a contract, not see himself able to hold out, and he would have to come to practice, which I think would suck for him again because the risk of injury in San Francisco is quite high, is that the NFLPA and the most recent collective bargaining agreement made it so that teams, when they fine you for holding out of practice or not showing to organize team activities or whatever the case might be, mandatory team practice, when they fine you, they are no longer allowed to reimburse you once you decide to show your face at practice again. So if you talk about some of the other more famous holdouts, Le'Veon Bell, Melvin Gordon, those guys, Le'Veon never reported, but, when Melvin comes back or any of these other guys, Dalvin Cook held out for a little bit, they come back, you give them their money that they missed out on for holding out. You say, thank you for coming back to the team. Can't do that anymore. It's a rule. So any money that Deebo were or would be losing out on here, he will not be able to get back, which, on a small rookie deal, he might want that money. So we're getting a little bit off track in terms of raw fantasy football analysis here, but the risk with Deebo Samuel is he going to actually play football this year? We're going to learn a lot more about that throughout the rest of the summer here, but for now, as a player, the dynamic ability to be physical, a rusher and a receiver, the wide back, if you will, that's what he called himself last year. It's such an important value in fantasy football. Obviously, the risk is that he gets injured because he's playing a more physical style of football than any other receiver or player at his position, but he is a huge body, very thick, again, very strong. He can impose as well, run guys over. They are not afraid to use him and literally run halfback power over and over again with him, get him out in the screen game. There's a lot he can do. He's extremely explosive. And if he's out there, he's definitely a top-level wide receiver one for fantasy football purposes. Now, the 1B category. This is going to be players that I think are definitely finishing as top 12 players, if, again, healthy. It's kind of the one asterisk we have right now. But I just don't see them finishing in that elite category. Now, Stefon Diggs is the first guy in this group. Yes, he has fantastic, phenomenal quarterback play with Josh Allen. We've seen him finish and have a top 3 or 4 wide receiver finish in the 2020 season, where he was an absolute league winner back in Week 16 against the Pats that season. I was a victim in a couple of leagues of Stefon Diggs' massive game, despite the fact that I had Rodgers and Adams against the Titans. Still salty about that one. However, if you lived that experience, you can relate with me a little bit there. Stefon Diggs, though, I think maxed out his ceiling that season. I'd be very, very shocked to see him best that statistical year and best some of the upsides of these other players that I could see playing out for the sole purpose that or reasoning that he has competition for targets in Buffalo. They are adding more and more pieces to that puzzle. And yes, Stefon Diggs is the best player in that offense. I'm not going to go too Gabe Davis happy here, although he is the emerging threat that a lot of people think he could be a top 2 target in Buffalo. You've got Dawson Knox still there. Khalil Shakir just got brought in to play the slot role, although I think Jamison Crowder is the guy in the slot for this season. He's a very legit target out there. And then you brought in O.J. Howard. You've got James Cook coming in the situation. Devin Singletary returning. We'll see if they even want to use Zach Moss anymore. But again, he was 5th in targets last season, 25% of the target share in the Buffalo Bills offense with arguably the best quarterback for a fantasy receiver to have in Josh Allen. It's either him or Mahomes probably at this point in time. But you still got a great situation. Definitely has top 6 upside. But I've got him just on the fringe outside of that category here with those other names kind of, competing for extra targets. Mike Evans is someone I'm also going to toss into this bubble here now. He only had a 16.4% target share, which was 58th in the league last season. However, I do see that number increasing this year. You're talking about Chris Godwin recovering from an ACL injury. That's significant. Is he going to be able to come in and be 100% of the player he was prior to that injury? I'm going to say probably not, at least for the first quarter or first half of the year. So I expect more volume heading Mike Evans' direction. Additionally, Antonio Brown removed himself from the situation in Tampa Bay through his little striptease party against the Jets late last season. They brought in Russell Gage, who I think is very competent, will probably play a significant role in the slot or however that may be. He can play a little bit outside as well. He's a little bit of a leaner receiver, but he does have some nice size. Definitely an underrated piece of the Falcons roster the last few seasons, but I think Mike Evans comes in, scores a lot of touchdowns, and has statistical improvement from last year. Again, I didn't have Mike Evans ranked this highly last year, but I think that his ADP this season growing a little bit is justified because the situation with Tom Brady coming back, there's a lot to like here, and I think that, 113 targets last season, that number will probably grow, and I would be shocked if it's not north of 120 looks total for the 2022 season. Now, where is our next name here? Where did he go? CeeDee Lamb. Next name up I want to put in this list. So the intrigue with CeeDee Lamb for me is that there's a lot of opened up volume. So he's going to fit right there into that kind of solidified wide receiver 1 tier for me. You've got the absence of Amari Cooper. They shipped him out for basically a bag of dirt, a 5th round pick. And, that's creating a lot of looks. Amari Cooper was easily the toughest level of competition for CeeDee Lamb to see volume on a weekly basis. And with him not there anymore, you've now got Michael Gallup also coming off an ACL injury. It's probably going to take him some time to get his legs underneath him. And then you've got Jalen Tolbert, an unproven rookie from small school competition to, play alongside CeeDee early in the year. So if Michael Gallup's ready to go week 1, that's great. That's fantastic. We'd love to see that. But I think CeeDee Lamb should easily lead this team in targets this season. He only had 79 catches last year, still went over 1,000 yards. So very, very efficient numbers there. I think that's just going to continue to improve. He was one of my favorite receivers in the 2020 class. Wildly talented. He's got good enough quarterback play with Dak Prescott. If Justin Jefferson can have elite seasons with Kirk Cousins, CeeDee Lamb can have elite seasons with Dak. I think this is a culmination of events and circumstances that are leading up to the boom and emergence of CeeDee Lamb as an elite fantasy receiver. He's been ranked as an elite option in Dynasty for his entire career, but I think it's finally the year that he's going to hit on those projections and show us why we've invested into him so much in those formats of leagues, because he is that guy, he is that talent, and I think that the opportunity, again, has finally risen this season. Keenan Allen is, I could be wrong here, but I believe he's the last name I'm putting in my 1B category today. Now, Keenan Allen is someone who, unlike the other names, I would say probably has the lowest ceiling of any of the first, 10 names up on the board today. So for me, the reasoning for that is that Keenan Allen is not an elite field stretcher. He's not a big play wide receiver. He's not a dominant force in the red zone. But what he is a consistency monster. This guy is going to see a high volume of targets, a high volume, again, of passes thrown his direction on a weekly basis, game by game here. And he's in a Justin Herbert-led offense. So if you're telling me I get the top target of Justin Herbert's for the entirety of the season, not that he's going to have this monstrous ceiling, but he will have, a couple multi-touchdown games per year, high yardage performances. He had 157 targets last year and 25% of the target share. So while a guy like Mike Williams, who is also in the list today, may have and definitely does have a higher ceiling, Keenan Allen's floor is a heck of a lot better, and the slot role that he provides for the LA Chargers is quite valuable if you're looking for a guy who, again, can be a consistent lineup staple for you week in and week out. So now we're going to get into the biggest group of today's video, the wide receiver 1 bubble. Talking through lots of names here, talking about why they could finish as a wide receiver 1, why they might not finish as a wide receiver 1, and obviously all the details in between. So the first guy I want to talk about is Amari Cooper today. Again, going right by the book down the list today. Amari Cooper is a guy who is once again finding himself in a situation where he has the clear-cut opportunity to be a team's number 1 target. And if you're telling me that he possibly is having an upgrade at the quarterback position in a a decline in terms of the, but that's poor phrasing. The competition for targets is lower than it was in Dallas. So you've got Donovan Peoples-Jones and David Bell essentially are your top two competitions for targets. David Njoku, I guess, as an alternative position at the tight end spot, and obviously a run-first offense. But in terms of being a skilled position playmaker by catching the football, Amari Cooper is definitely the best and most talented player on that Cleveland Browns roster, and he's not having to deal with Baker Mayfield, which we thought was a scenario when he was traded to Cleveland. That had him going down my rankings, but then they make the trade for Deshaun Watson, and he's immediately shooting back up the board. So you're talking about a guy who has had elite seasons produced for guys like DeAndre Hopkins and Will Fuller in his time as a Houston Texan, and the consistency that he's been able to provide for his top targets in those offenses. Unless he's rusty, unless he sees a large suspension of some shape or form, I think Cooper has a really good fantasy outlook for the season, and at his current ADP, I think it's actually a bit of a steal right now. I'm surprised it hasn't pushed a little bit higher than what we saw as of late. Now, we talked about Tyreek Hill earlier. I'm going to talk about his teammate Jalen Waddle. I could easily see him if he gets enough volume or has an increased level of efficiency in this season from last. I could see him finishing as a top 12 option. However, I think it's more than likely he doesn't in especially non-full PPR formats. Even in a half PPR league, I think that it could be the difference. Maybe he's the wide receiver 11 or 12 in full PPR, and half PPR, maybe he's 14 or 15, just because that extra half point per reception is going to be so valuable to him. But when you're talking about a player in Jalen Waddle who had 142 targets last year and just under 25% of the target share, I don't know if we can expect those numbers to go up, because when you put a guy like Tyreek Hill in this offense, unless the overall production of this football team increases significantly, I don't know how you maintain that number. Now, again, it's not like the Dolphins are some elite offense that is really capped out at ceiling and that there's no more targets to go around, because if they sustain drives and keep their offense on the field for longer, there is an outside chance that that does occur. However, I'm trying to be, again, objective here, realistic, and not over-project players. His efficiency was really bad last year. 89th in yards per reception at 9.8 yards per reception, especially on that volume of routes, is not great. Additionally, he also played 43.8 of his snaps in the slot last season. So you're talking about a player also who's probably going to compete with Tyreek a little bit for that slot role. Now, it's not like these guys can't coexist and be on the field at the same time together, but that slot role is how they got him out in space with blockers coming off the edge, him on a little bubble route, and then, getting him out in space, running with the football in his hands. So these are all things you got to think through here. How effective can Tua really be pushing the ball downfield, or are they literally going to have to just play pitch and catch with these two receivers over and over again? And at that point, your offense is fairly predictable. How sustainable is that? And, how long can you really sustain a high level of production for these two receivers? So all concerns I have, all things I'm not super excited about, but realities that we're facing in this offense right now. DK Metcalf, another wide receiver bubble player I have. I'm probably leaning towards him finishing outside the top 12 at this point in time. But you're talking about a guy who in 2021, despite having Russell Wilson out with the mallet finger for a chunk of the season and having to deal with Geno Smith, he finished 6th in air yards. So you're talking about, Justin Jefferson was number 1. DK Metcalf was right up there, getting balls pushed to him downfield, and the opportunity for incredibly efficient play, because DK is the guy who in the past has produced wildly productive fantasy weeks off of just 4 catches for nearly 100 yards or more and multiple scores at times. But I don't know if he can maintain the catchable passes rate that he had with Russell Wilson moving now to Drew Lock. So that number was a bit inaccurate, so we're not going to discuss that in too much detail in today's video because he had those quarterback changes last season. You're talking about a number kind of blended together between Geno Smith and Russell Wilson. But in terms of having Drew Lock for an entire season, or, I heard an awful report for all fantasy players that Geno Smith currently has a leg up to be the week 1 starter. If that's the case, big L for DK. He may not finish as a top 25 receiver if Geno Smith were to start all the games this season. But I do think the one thing that he will maintain if Drew Lock is the starter is the downfield targets, the air yards, because I think that Drew Lock, having as big of an arm as he does, will try to push the ball downfield. we're just going to have to find out the hard way how effective he's going to be in doing so. So who is our next player up in today's video? Let's talk some Tee Higgins here. So I mentioned him a little bit at the top of the episode. He actually out-targeted Ja'Marr Chase. So Ja'Marr had 23.7% of the target share in Cincinnati last season. Obviously, catching passes from Joe Burrow is a huge plus for both of these players. Now you're looking at Tee Higgins here, 23.9%. So a 0.2% victory in the target share department for Tee Higgins. But I gotta say, I know there's a lot of Tee Higgins truthers out there. I would lean on the side and err towards Ja'Marr Chase being the guy long-term. The number one target, again, Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen can coexist in Minnesota. You're talking about Tee Higgins being that kind of Robin to the Batman of Ja'Marr Chase. He is a much better athlete, a much better prospect, has a better quarterback. You can see how he can maintain top 12 wide receiver level production because of the situation he's in Cincinnati. You've got a guy who only caught 6 touchdown passes last year. That number, in my opinion, should be higher. You've got a 6'4" wide receiver with a huge wingspan. He's a weapon down there. He should be catching more TD passes. That's the one, again, question mark I have for Ja'Marr Chase. I think Tee Higgins checks that box pretty easily. We saw that very effectively in his rookie season, even when Joe Burrow suffered the ACL injury. So I think he can outscore Ja'Marr Chase any given week. Again, over the course of the season, over the long haul, the larger sample size, I will take Chase to be the more productive player. That's why we've got him in the elite category here. But Tee Higgins is no slouch. He should not be slept on just because he's the number 2 in this offense. This is an offense that has the ability to produce at an elite level, which a lot of teams do not have, and that can't be understated or taken lightly. So Tee Higgins for me, 6 touchdowns in 2021. I wouldn't be surprised any season if he surpassed double-digit scores, and he's a threat to go over, obviously, 1,000, 1,100, maybe even 1,200 yards in a given season as well. So lots of upside with Tee Higgins there. Who else we talk about here? Oops, didn't mean to bump the mic there. We've also got A.J. Brown that I want to talk about in this category. So A.J. Brown, for me, situational change. I'm not going to dive too much into the stats that he had with Tennessee. All you need to know, super efficient player, big-time playmaker over the top. The play-action game was lethal with Derrick Henry, obviously drawing in so much attention in the run game. Then Ryan Tannehill was able to just shot put the ball over the top of the defense and get the ball to another physically imposing player in space, that be A.J. Brown. So here you're moving to Philadelphia. Again, a wide receiver that changed situations. We don't have an updated headshot just yet. A couple guys like, where's Amari Cooper at? We had his, and A-Rob had his headshot done already. So don't worry, we'll get all that stuff updated here throughout the season. But changing situations to Philadelphia, A.J. Brown's moving to a quarterback who I think has a chance to finish as the QB1 overall in fantasy football this season. However, not because of his passing. Now, A.J. Brown kind of tips him over the edge for me as a guy who could finish in that light and with that level of upside. But in terms of A.J. Brown's fantasy outlook, I think it's a little bit of a detriment. Jalen Hurts is not a good passer. He had, of all of the 32 starting quarterbacks in the National Football League in terms of passer rating and completion percentage, dead last. He's just not a good passer. He's a very dynamic threat with his legs and can do a lot to play make with the football. However, again, especially downfield passing, I'm not super confident in him. The mess that was created against Tampa Bay in the playoffs, the actual, when you're getting a real defensive look against a team that is schemed for you to stop you in one game, he was double clutching footballs, throwing, just like lollipop throws downfield, soft passes. Devontae Smith was getting heated because he was open and not getting targeted effectively. I just don't see this going well, even though the two have chemistry, that being AJ and Jalen Hurts. And I think that this situation has a lot of risk to it. Now, if AJ's able to, the Philadelphia Eagles were the number 1 rushing team in the league last year. They actually ran the ball more times than Tennessee did. If they're able to set up a super explosive and effective play-action game, maybe he's able to replicate his efficiency, but I think you're going to have to find unique ways to get AJ the football to maintain that kind of fringe bubble wide receiver 1 production, and I will not be drafting him in very many circumstances this season. So Deontay Johnson, we're rounding out kind of this wide receiver 1 bubble and about ready to move into, the wide receiver 2 category. So Deontay Johnson in PPR formats has been a solidified wide receiver one the past 2 years in terms of production, average points per game. But I see a little bit more risk this year. You're moving from Big Ben Roethlisberger to Kenny Pickett or Mitchell Trubisky. I think that potential for multiple quarterbacks starting this season gives me a little bit of risk, a little bit of just hesitancy in terms of drafting Deontay Johnson on a frequent basis in leagues this year. His efficiency was quite poor with Big Ben. He only had 10.9 yards per reception, so we were talking about how Jalen Waddle struggled in that category. Deontay was just a little bit better, but still ranked 75th in the department. So of all the wide receivers, if you take the number one receiver for the 32 teams, and then their second receiver, that would give you 64 receivers. This puts him into a team's number third ranked spot for efficiency, which is not very good whatsoever. And obviously there's outliers to this category. There's far less skilled players than Deontay Johnson who are probably more efficient than him. But in terms of that metric, efficiency was very poor. And, one of the reasons that it was okay that his efficiency was so poor is because of the mass target share he was receiving with Big Ben not really being able to push the ball downfield. You're getting him at the line of scrimmage, just flicking balls out there, screen passes, and getting him a lot of cracks and swings at the bat. But again, not really too many explosive plays. So for me, that's the red flag with Deontay Johnson. Will Kenny Pickett or Trubisky decide they like him as much as Big Ben did? And will they draw up plays to get him the ball that many times? I don't know the answer to that question. So to me, 50-50. Maybe yes, maybe no. If he gets 140, 150 targets again this season, maybe Deontay Johnson finishes in PPR formats as a wide receiver one. But I think it's a really fair shot or reasonable estimate that might not be the case with a rookie quarterback or a bridge QB, who neither of which are much for downfield passers. Now, Kenny Pickett is very, very accurate with the football. However, you have to kind of chart in the expectations for that learning curve and that growth period, because even as excited about Justin Fields as I was last year and how he was finally going to be able to be the over-the-top passing threat for the Bears offense, we saw Allen Robinson, who is somewhat of a similar player. We'll talk about him in just a second. To a Deontay Johnson, he kind of fell off the face of the earth and was unstartable last year because of that growing pains with Justin Fields in that offense. So the final name that's going in this category today is going to be Chris Godwin. Now, the reason that he is in the bubble is simply because of the injury. If I knew Chris Godwin was coming out week one and was going to be seeing the team lead in target share for Tampa Bay's offense in that big slot role, hardly coming off the field, always being out there and dependable, really safe floor, much safer than Mike Evans' floor in years past, at least in the Tom Brady era in Tampa Bay, he'd probably be in the 1B category. However, ACL, you don't know how fast you're going to get the true Chris Godwin back out there. And for me, that's enough to put him down here in the bubble, because I think that either not being available for games or just simply being out there but not as effective as humanly possible. We saw this, again, different circumstances, but OBJ took him a little bit of time to get on track with his ACL. Obviously saw a total team situation and environment change last year, or even Cam Akers came back down the stretch after that wildly fast recovered from the Achilles injury. He had a really poor efficiency just because he wasn't himself. He's not ready to be himself yet. And I think we might even see a little bit of struggles early on this season. So all things to consider there. That's why he falls kind of outside that bubble for me. Now, moving into the strong wide receiver twos category, the first name I want to toss up there, just, the order of these players does not matter. It matters what tier they're on. That's why we're doing a tier list as opposed to numbered rankings, which is what we usually do on the channel here. But I've had a lot of fun switching things up and talking through tiers. So Terry McLaurin, strong wide receiver 2 category. Why? To me, wide receiver 2s might not always be the most consistent players in the world. However, they do have high ceiling. They have the potential to finish as a top 12 performer in any given week. Terry McLaurin is that guy. Last year, I think where we went wrong, where a lot of fantasy analysts and players went wrong, was expecting Terry to become consistent with the high upside production he had in his rookie season. And while that, happened, or he's a 2019 receiver, so while we could expect him, so last year was not his second season, rather it was his third. I believe he's going into year 4 now. So while we expected him to take that leap in terms of efficiency, in terms of being this player who would be, well, he already was incredibly efficient, but consistency with that efficiency. The quarterback play in Taylor Heinicke was not set up for him to succeed in that category, which led to wild sides of the spectrum, big-time boom weeks like the Giants game, the first Giants game, or huge bust games where he just really kills your lineup. And I see similar situations happening this season, but to a lesser extent. I think Carson Wentz keeps that ceiling sky high with the big arm talent he has. But his lows are quite low, and he's got a chance to completely screw some weeks up for Terry McLaurin and make him borderline unstartable at times. So it's going to be hard to predict, against those easier coverage matchups. You can probably predict Terry will go off, but that wasn't always the case last year. He didn't always cash in the nice matchups, and sometimes against tougher competition like James Bradbury for the Giants, he dominated him and was all over him all night long. So there's a wild inconsistency and discrepancy in point production values for Terry McLaurin, but that's why he lands as a wide receiver 2 and not as a wide receiver 1, which I think is where we started to raise our expectations for last season, but that obviously didn't play out effectively. So Mike Williams, similar situation, wild inconsistency, but the highs are about as high as any wide receiver in the league. We saw that last year when he was a top 5 wide receiver in terms of just total fantasy points for a stretch of the year before he kind of had a really quiet middle part of the season before kind of resurging down the stretch. This is a big playmaker. This is Justin Herbert's deep shot downfield, his red zone weapon, the guy that's going to win those 50-50 balls and make them 75-25 balls in favor of the Chargers. He's got, again, a ridiculous ceiling, can be insanely efficient, but he will, again, have stinker performances because he's not a volume player. He's not a guy that's going to see 10-plus targets on a weekly basis. This is a guy that needs to go and average a hefty amount of yardage per catch. So Mike Williams is definitely a wide receiver 2, but if you're looking for a best ball play, Mike Williams is your guy because he could be the difference in any given week. Jerry Jeudy's got some off the field stuff right now, but I feel confident in the situation and the talent of the player. This is a guy who, you look back to 2020, I was thinking of Jerry Jeudy in the same light that I think about CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson. I actually thought higher of Jerry Jeudy than I did of Justin Jefferson pre-draft. And, call me a fool now, but I'm pretty sure that you probably thought the same after what Jerry did at the University of Alabama and, Justin Jefferson being either second or third fiddle in that LSU offense behind Jamar Chase, his former teammate, and obviously Terrace Marshall was also there as well making plays. So, Jerry Jeudy's got all the talent in the world. He's one of the best young route runners in the league. Injuries have been a little bit of a problem for him. And quarterback play, Drew Lock, Teddy Bridgewater has not been ideal for him to start his career. But now you're going to Russell Wilson. So maybe he's got the best quarterback of anyone in the elite tier. Most of the players here in the 1A tier. There's a chance that Jerry Jeudy just erupts and has a massive season this year. He's got a chance to finish as a top 12 wideout, heck, even top 7, top 8. However, I'm going to manage my expectations. He does have competition for targets between Courtland Sutton, who's on the board here today, Albert O, the run game. All that stuff is still at play. Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler. So I don't know if he dominates the target share like, Justin Jefferson or some of these other guys do. So that's why he's still down in the wide receiver 2 category for me. And I'm a little bit higher on Jerry Jeudy than consensus is right now to begin with. So the last name here for this tier, Allen Robinson, A-Rob. I think he's going to thrive alongside Cooper Kupp. They're going to be paying so much attention to him. He's going to be repping against number 2 and number 3 DBs all day long. And as a guy who I think could be the lead wideout on a team, beat number 1 coverage effectively with his route running and savviness. He's pretty athletic as well. I think it's a wrap. I mean, Matt Stafford's going to be eating this year, throwing the ball all over the yard to really talented receivers. And A-Rob, again, is going to have the opportunity to thrive from everyone keying in and trying to slow down the Triple Crown leader from last season, or winner, or whatever you want to call it, from last season. So I like that situation a lot. And then these 3 guys, I'll just slap them on here. We'll break them down here quickly. Courtland Sutton, I just think, is a lesser volume play than Jerry Jeudy. I think that he has a lot of utility in the red zone, has a lot of big playmaking ability, and he's a very good athlete for his size. However, I think that the route runner, Jerry Jeudy in this sense, wins in terms of, again, target share and just having more footballs thrown his way from Russell Wilson. Both of them should have statistical improvements from last season. Courtland Sutton is now officially back a full season under his belt after having the significant injury in 2020. And I expect him to be as much of himself as he can possibly be this year. Michael Pittman had some fantastic games last year with double-digit volume, but you bring Alec Pierce into the situation, switch up the quarterback roles. I think that maybe the ceiling in terms of throwing the football downfield as opposed or from having Carson Wentz to going to Matt Ryan now, the ceiling might be just a tad lower, but I think the floor becomes stabilized a bit more, which is very valuable to me. But again, depending on who Matt Ryan picks as his favorite target, because again, Pittman broke out with Wentz as his quarterback, not Phillip Rivers' rookie season, but Carson Wentz in year 2. Now in year 3, who will Matt Ryan like? Will it be Alec Pierce? Will it be Pittman? Will they be able to coexist? You've still got the number 1 running back in the league, Jonathan Taylor, on that team. So a lot of stuff to kind of digest there. That's why he's kind of a bubble wide receiver 2 for me here. And then Mike Thomas. I mean, as odd as it sounds to say, for a guy who the last time we saw him play a true season of NFL football was the wide receiver 1 in the 2019 season, broke records for receptions in a single season, was dominant, was Drew Brees' number 1 target. No longer has that quarterback. It's been 2 years since we've seen him really play football, and he's progressing towards age 30. He was an older rookie when he came into the league, and things move fast. Time flies by. Is Michael Thomas still the same player? That's yet to be decided. Who knows if that's the circumstance here. He's being drafted like a wide receiver 2 right now. Fair, because I think, last year I tried to be savvy. I'd scoop up Michael Thomas in the 8th round if I could, thinking, I might just get a fringe top 12 receiver on my hands here once he comes back from injury. And he never played a game last year. Made me look like a fool in a few leagues where I thought I had the upper hand with a guy who was going to be incredibly valuable and, never ended up taking a rep for me. So we'll see what happens. Jameis Winston is expected to be the quarterback. I think that means a little bit more pushing the ball downfield. I think that favors Chris Olave a little bit, but we'll see how that situation unfolds. So those are my top 24 wide receiver tiers right now. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to drop down, click that like button, and subscribe to the SFS channel if you're new around here. We'd love to have you join the community. Drop down, join the community Discord. The invite link is in the description of today's episode. I appreciate all of you guys for sticking with me, supporting the channel, and all that great stuff. Go check out our social media accounts, in particular Twitter. Pushing really hard to grow that channel or community right now and increase our following there, and just have a great summer with you guys. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we'll be posting multiple videos per day in terms of actual episodic videos. We're trying to get out a short every single day of the week here if we can. But we had a mock draft today, and we'll be doing some more in-depth fantasy analysis here, position specific today, and all that great stuff on, again, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So today was Monday's episode, and go check out, some playlists or some of the other episodes and videos we've got up on the channel. So thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you guys tomorrow. Peace out.